day and welcome. We are busy with monopolies today, and a monopoly is one of the four market structures. In the previous video, we looked at a perfect competition, and now we are going to have a look at what is a monopoly. Now, a monopoly itself is very scarce. It's very rare that you get a pure monopoly because a monopoly is obviously only one. It's where close substitutes does not exist. You have information about this topic, and obviously collusion between firms is irrelevant because there is only one firm that produces this goods or service. It has control over the market price. The demand curve, I will show you now how it looks like, and also you can make a long run profit. Lots of people think that Eskom, for example, is a pure example of a monopoly in South Africa, which is not the case. It is known as a quasi-monopoly, Eskom, because there exists substitutes in a way for electricity. You have solar, for instance, or wind electricity. Transnet may be considered as a monopoly, but also there are substitutes involved with regards to you can fly rather than take a plane, or you can fly instead of taking the train, or you can use a bus, or you can drive your car, or you can walk, or you can drive a motorcycle, or whatever. There's more ways to skin a cat. But that is more or less the idea that you get with regards to a monopoly. Now we're going to look at the long run economic position of a monopoly, and that they can make a long run profit. But before we get started, let's just show you what a monopoly looks like. So when we worked with a perfect competitive firm, we always drew the horizontal line. It's a price taken. Now with a monopoly, it looks something like this. You have your marginal revenue and you have your average revenue curve. That is resembled in the little schedule on your left hand side. So if you draw this, that's what it looks like. And also your average revenue is your demand curve. So that is the demand curve. It's downward sloping. It's not horizontal like a perfect competitive firm. So now we can get to the long run position of a monopoly. So a monopoly making an economic profit looks something like this. You have your marginal revenue curve. You have your average revenue curve, which is your demand curve, and then you have your marginal cost curve as well, and then you have your cost curve. And now what we're going to do is you always indicate again your maximum profit, which is also the same rule with a perfect competitive firm. Firms make profit where your marginal revenue equals your marginal cost. You take that up until where it cuts your demand curve, and that is the price that you ask. So your total revenue is then generated with a purple block. So total revenue is P1 times Q1. So this is your total revenue curve or block. Now where this line knocks or cuts your average cost curve, this is where your average cost curve is. So this is your cost. So total cost is then your P2 times Q1. That is cost. If you subtract the red block from the purple block, it leaves you with this green block, and this is then your long-term profit for a monopoly. Now, in the next slide, we see a natural monopoly. Now, a natural monopoly is where there's no other firm that can produce it at a cost as low. And then we need to look at the possible places where a monopoly can produce. So the first one is we would actually like to produce where your marginal cost cut your average cost curve. That is where your cost is at a minimum point. You can't produce here because your demand curve does not run here. Your demand curve stops here. It does not cut the marginal cost and average cost line there. So you can't produce there. The other point that we can look at in producing is where price equals marginal cost. This is where this arrow here is. But you would also not like to produce here because at this point you're actually making a loss because your average cost is above your marginal and average revenue line. Then we can move up to this place where price equals average cost. This is where you actually are making a normal profit. So this is doable. One can produce here. And also obviously one can produce, monopoly can produce where your marginal revenue equals your marginal cost. That is where it is unregulated. And that is in the short Short nutshell, monopoly.